Hi, my name is Akankshya Upadhyay and I am your English instructor. In today's class, we will be solving the exercise portion of Unit 3, which is reporting questions. So let's begin. Today we will be reading the story of the ant and the grasshopper. I could not help thinking of this fable when the other day I saw George Ramsay lunching by himself in a restaurant. I never saw anyone wear an expression of such deep gloom. He was staring into space. He looked as though the burden of the whole world sat on his shoulders. I was sorry for him. I suspected at once that his unfortunate brother had been causing trouble again. I went up to him and held out my hand. "How are you?" I asked. "I am not in hilarious spirits," he answered. "Is it Tom again?" He sighed. "Yes, it's Tom again." "Why don't you chunk him? You've done everything in the world for him. You must know by now that he's quite hopeless." "I suppose every family has a black sheep. Tom has been a sore trial to him for 20 years. He had begun his life decently enough. He went into business, married, and had 2 children. The Ramsays were perfectly respectable people, and there was every reason to suppose that Tom Ramsay would have a successful and honorable career. But one day, without warning, he announced that he didn't like work and that he isn't suited for marriage. He wanted to enjoy by himself. He would listen to no expostulations. He left his wife and his office. He had a little money and he spent 2 happy years in the various capitals of Europe. Rumors of his doings reached his relations from time to time, and they were profoundly shocked. He certainly had a very good time. They shook their heads and asked what would happen when his money was spent. They soon found out. He borrowed. He was charming and unscrupulous. I have never met anyone to whom it was more difficult to refuse a loan. He made a steady income from his friends and he made friends easily. But he always said that the money you spent on necessities was boring. The money that was amusing to spend was the money you spent on luxuries. For this he depended on his brother George. He did not waste his charm on him. George was a serious man and insensible to such indecements. George was respectable. Once or twice he fell to Tom's promises of amendment and gave him considerable sums in order that might make a fresh start. On these Tom bought a motor car and some very nice jewelry. But when circumstances forced George to realize that his brother would never settle down and he wasted his hands on him, Tom, without a qualm, began to blackmail him. It was not very nice for a respectable lawyer to find his brother shaking cocktails behind the bar of his favorite restaurant or to see him waiting on the box seat of a taxi outside his club. Tom said that to serve in a bar or to drive taxi was a perfectly decent occupation. But if George could oblige him with a couple of £100, he didn't mind for the honor of the family giving up. George paid. Once Tom nearly went to prison. George was terribly upset. He went into the whole discreditable affair. Really, Tom had gone too far. He had been wild, toothless, and selfish, but he had never before done anything dishonest, by which George meant illegal, and if he were prosecuted, he would assuredly be convicted. But you cannot allow your only brother to go to jail. The man Tom had cheated, a man called Cronshaw, was vindictive. He was determined to take the matter into the court. He said Tom was a scoundrel and should be punished. It cost George an infinite deal of trouble and £500 to settle the affair. I have never seen him in such a rage as when he heard that Tom and Cronshaw had gone off together to Monte Carlo the moment they cashed the check. They spent a happy month there. We just read a story about 2 brothers, and the younger one is taking advantage of his elder brother. Now, after reading the story, we will go through the exercise portion, and first we will have to answer the questions. The first question is, who was the black sheep in Ramsay's family? Why? The answer we already know. So a black sheep means causing trouble. Who was causing trouble in Ramsay's family? It is, of course, Tom. So we say the black sheep in Ramsay's family is Tom, because Tom has been a sore trial to George for 20 years. He has been troubling George for 20 years. So the answer is Tom was the black sheep in Ramsay's family, as he was a sore trial to George for 20 years. The second question is, what was a respectable profession to Tom? To George and the Ramsays, the respectful profession was to be a lawyer. But to Tom, respectable profession was to serve in a bar or to drive a taxi. Why was George Ramsay staring into the space? Now this is the third question we have. So George Ramsay is the elder brother, and he was staring into space because his brother was causing a lot of troubles. So the answer is George Ramsay was staring into space because his brother was causing him a lot of troubles. The next question is, why did Tom leave his job and his wife? So the answer is Tom left his job because he didn't work and wife because he wasn't suited for marriage. How did Tom manage his life when he ran out of money first? So we read in the story that Tom borrowed money from his friends, and in that way he used to manage his life. The next question is, how did Tom and Kronsa cheat George? So we read in the story that Kronsa was very angry when he was talking about Tom to George, and he said that Tom was a scoundrel and should be punished. And in order to save a brother from going to jail, George paid a huge amount of money to Kronsa, but later he knows that Kronsa and Tom were friends, and they were being dishonest with George in order to take money from him. So in this way, they cheated George. Now we can say Tom and Kronsa cheated George by faking a situation where Kronsa almost took the matter into court. Now the final question is, what forced George to realize that his brother would never settle down? Tom asked money to George for a fresh start, but ended up buying a motor car and nice jewelry. This situation made George to realize that his brother would never settle down. Now next we will put the sentences in correct order. Here are 9 sentences and we need to put them in correct order. Now in order to classify them or number them, first we will go through all the points and then know whether a particular point should be towards the beginning of the story, in the middle, or towards the end. He began to blackmail his brother. Now this is towards the end of our story. Tom began to blackmail George for money. He left his wife and office. So this is towards the beginning of our story. When his money was spent, he borrowed it from friends and spent it on luxuries. So this is also towards the beginning, where the character of Tom is being built. George continued to pay for his brother's expenses. Now this is towards the end of our story. He bought a motor car and some nice jewelry. So again, towards the end, Tom took help of Kronso to cheat his brother and left for Monte Carlo. Now this must be our last point, or this can be the last point we have, or it is towards the very end. He promised to make a fresh start. So this is towards the middle. The Ramsays were perfectly respectable people. Now this must be our first sentence. He never settled down is towards the between. So first we have the Ramsays were perfectly respectable people. This is our first sentence. Now after this, the story says that Tom left his wife and office. After this, we have when his money was spent, he borrowed it from friends and spent it on luxuries. So this comes third. So he never settled down is the fourth point. Now to ask for money, he promised to make a fresh start. This must be our fifth point. Now after his brother stopped giving him money, he began to blackmail his brother for money. This must be our sixth point. So George continued to pay for his brother's expenses is the seventh point we have. And with the money, he bought a motor car and some nice jewelry. So this is our eighth point. And finally, he took help of Cronshaw to cheat his brother and left for Monte Carlo. This is our ninth point. And with this, we are done with this lesson. The homework for today's class is to answer the following. So the question is, what would you do if you were the brother of Tom Ramsay? So write it in 500 words about what would you do. This is an opinion question, so you can say you would do exactly the same as George has done, or you can also say that I wouldn't do this. Please write your opinion on this question. And with this, we've come to the end of today's class. If you have any questions, any suggestions, or anything that you wish to share with us, please feel free to write to us at learning@dearwalk.edu.np. Thanks for watching.